Hi, in this video, I will be going over the development and modern use of today's Piazza della Repubblica and whether its effect on the city of Florence was positive or negative. While there are strong arguments for both if the piazza should or shouldn't have been created, I do believe that through the past and present uses of the piazza, we can learn if its construction was the correct decision. Piazza della Repubblica is today a lively square, boasting a carousel, several restaurants, and many shops right around the exterior roads of the piazza. Even the Accent student dorms have to be entered through a door that goes almost directly into the piazza. What many visitors and students who are not in this class don't know is that this piazza is a much more recent development than they may think. Before Piazza della Repubblica, the space was a Jewish ghetto in Mercato Vecchio. Instead of a big open space, there were narrow roads and small market stalls. The Jewish ghetto was created in 1571 under Medici rule and quickly became a religious, economic, and social hub for the Jewish population of Florence. For most of its existence, the ghetto was an act of segregation. It also held many businesses that its residents operated, such as small banks and food stands. In 1848, the ghetto no longer had walls surrounding it, but still was seen as a site that was holding Florence back. In the 19th century, Florence was attracting visitors from places such as England and became known as the City of the Renaissance. The Jewish ghetto and market were seen as old, medieval sites that did not fit with the image of Florence that they wanted to create. The elites especially held negative views and pushed for improvement. They wanted a clean and cohesive city center in order to not undermine their image when they were briefly the capital of Italy. On the other hand, many who leaned more towards anarchist and socialist views believed that demolishing the ghetto would only help those with businesses or who were already wealthy, and would unnecessarily displace the ghetto's residents. There was also an argument that money from residents was being spent on projects that would mainly appeal to tourists, which rightfully seems unfair. In 1885, the demolition was approved, and in 1895, the piazza was unveiled and even had the inscription, "The ancient center of the city, restored from age-old squalor to new life," emphasizing that they needed what they deemed old, unfit parts of the city to be renewed and modernized. Today, the big, busy market atmosphere that you once found before the piazza's construction is now observed in two other markets, San Lorenzo, also known as Mercato Centrale, or Sant'Ambrogio. These markets are very busy and clearly successful in attracting visitors and being economically viable to the city. The Jewish ghetto's destruction would of course significantly impact Florence's Jewish population. Even though the gates were removed earlier and Jewish people were allowed to leave, poorer families hadn't been able to, and also likely did not want to lose access to their social community, kosher businesses, and religious sites that they were used to. Families had to then find affordable housing options, which spread a lot of the community out as they went into apartments in different neighborhoods or even the outskirts of Florence. The destruction did push forward the development of the Great Synagogue of Florence, which I didn't even know existed before working on this project. Even though there was now a new large religious site that brought people together again, it still doesn't fully replicate the ghetto of businesses and homes that had everyone in your social circle in close proximity. Many times, if cities have to develop areas that are once culturally or historically significant sites, they will leave plaques, statues, or other physical traces of remembrance. This is not the case with Piazza della Repubblica.
So what can you tell me about the history of Piazza della Repubblica?
The history of Piazza della Repubblica is that in early times, it used to serve as a market. It was one of the central places in the city, and it's one of the places in Florence that was largely refurbished because people saw it as a scar when Florence was going to become the capital of Italy.
Grayson McLeod, a study abroad student taking an Italian culture class at Accent, learned about the history of the square as a market, but makes no mention of its Jewish past. I would not have either without my urban art class, as there really is no clear or obvious indication that it was once the Jewish ghetto.
That's the Piazza of the Government, I believe, right? Is that the one with the Ferris wheel?
It's the one with the carousel. Yeah. What can you
Oh,
tell
okay,
me?
okay. So when Florence became the capital of Italy, there was a lot of housing in that area, and then they moved the housing, which was pretty controversial, to a different part of the city, and then they made that part of the city the main economic and political center. And I remember from one of our walking tours that they talked about how it's kind of almost a scar for part of Italy, because it shows how they displaced a lot of people when they made that part of the city like the kind of economical and political center. And yeah, I don't know.
Elizabeth Williams is also in a cultural class, and while she is more aware of the controversy and issues surrounding the piazza, there still is no mention of the specific community, that being the Jewish community, that was displaced. Even in students purposely studying Florence and its past, it is surprising to see how much significant details can easily be left out. While the history of Piazza della Repubblica isn't widely known, it definitely has a meaningful presence in Florence today. It is not only a large, beautiful square, but it is in a central location, being very close to the Duomo and many streets full of stores and restaurants. With Florence being a city that suffers from over-tourism, it is important to have a large gathering space for pedestrians to walk through and hang out in. Without Piazza della Repubblica, the surrounding streets would be even more overcrowded than they are, and nearby areas like the Duomo would have to take on even more floods of people. In this way, the piazza is almost a strategic space tool, drawing people out of the way of oncoming cars and keeping tourists in a set spot. This piazza also contributes to Florence's economy, which is heavily based on tourism. Tourist shops and Italian restaurants bring in revenue to the local economy, and many independent sellers walk around the square trying to sell film photos, roses, or get people to listen to their music. People rely on the piazza to help support their livelihood. While I have made points to why the piazza is a strong tool for tourism and is useful financially, I believe that based on the information I have found in my research and from my reflections, the destruction of the ghetto and market was the incorrect choice. First of all, there are so many other squares in Florence that could be utilized. Even if these squares get crowded, it feels as if everything was crowded all the time during the summer months anyway. And if anything, the choice of making city planning decisions around crowds and supporting the piazza is furthering the idealized view of Florence and its role as a tourism hub instead of a real city that Florentines actually live in. They destroyed a real market and real community to build something they thought would attract people, taking away from their own residents. The markets of San Lorenzo and Sant'Ambrogio are very lively, and if Mercato Vecchio survived, it too would likely become a must-see spot for food and shopping, and would have made up for the economic difference that not having the restaurants and shops that the piazza would have created. The Jewish population of Florence is around 1,000 today, and the ghetto was home to between 500 to 700 people right before its demolition. All of those people had a big part of their history erased just so that an area can be more picturesque and fit into how city leaders wanted Florence to develop. Instead of a piazza being viewed as a historic site, it has become a social space dedicated almost exclusively to tourists. And for that reason, the construction of what is now Piazza della Repubblica was wrong. While the creation cannot be undone and is a recognizable and important part of Florence today, more education on its past through a plaque, statue, or through making its history more widely known would give respect and appreciation to what came before Piazza della Repubblica.